began as part of the management team on this panel. As a macroeconomist for the last 30 years or more, I've been deeply aware that there are some problems or issues with the way that macroeconomics has developed. In fact, it's developed into what I think is rather a monocultural new Keynesian paradigm. And there have always been some people, and I consider myself working partly within that paradigm, but also trying to push its boundaries. And when I first came and became part of Rebuild Macro, I thought, well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to be economists pushing the boundaries. But I soon discovered that we were going even further than I'd actually thought. And I was now interacting with anthropologists and psychologists and physicists. And it was actually a very eye-opening experience for me. And the hub that I'm now running is co-organized with a physicist, Jean-Philippe Bouchot, who cannot be here unfortunately today. Jean-Philippe also runs a hedge fund in Paris, and I had an eye-opening conversation with him, which I'll tell you more about in a few minutes. Let me first say some more about the projects we're funding in the hub, of which you will see two today. We actually have 5 funded projects and 2 unfunded projects who are nevertheless as enthusiastic as the funded projects. That's part of the way we're spreading money around here. We have a couple of projects that fit into the category that I talked about initially, which are economists who would feel quite at home going to, say, the National Bureau of Economic Research, but are nevertheless working outside the boundaries of what's currently considered to be mainstream in that area. One of those projects is really looking at expectations, which is a theme that comes up in a couple of places. And another one is looking at nonlinearities and cycles in economics. Of the other projects, there are, Angus mentioned the way that we think of economics as a sort of grand coordinated mechanism. And a couple of ways, I think there are 2 ways of thinking about where the mainstream paradigm has gone wrong. One is a number of people have been thinking that maybe this notion of the maximizing individual is at fault. And one of the projects you'll see here today, in fact, I would say both of them are looking at the foundations of the way that we think about individuals behaving. And I'll let Sian Tan and Liesa talk about their project, and Nick and his authors talk about theirs. There's another way in which I think that things can be perceived to have gone wrong, and that's not necessarily in the way that we think about how individuals behave, but about the interactions of human beings, about the self-organization of society and markets. And that's where a number of the other projects are coming from. And that, incidentally, that's also the area that I found attractive when I was first introduced to Jean-Philippe. The introduction came through Doyne Farmer, who's on our management board and has a physics training, as does Jean-Philippe. And I sat down one evening for dinner in London with Jean-Philippe, and we talked a little bit about complexity theory. And I thought, well, I don't have much to learn here. I worked on this 20, 30 years ago. I didn't really see it as going anywhere. And for those of you who know a little bit about this, there's the paradigm of the butterfly wings in Brazil changing the weather in Ethiopia or wherever. So that's what people think about when they think about complexity. And there were attempts 20, 30 years ago to try and integrate those ideas into economics. And in my view, at least at the time, they didn't go very far. And they didn't go very far because what they really led to was a way of thinking about why the world might look random. And even if the world was actually deterministic, but looked random, if you didn't know the exact coordinates of the system at any point in time, you'd be no better off in helping to predict, and you might as well use the notion that the world is a random variable. Jean-Philippe introduced me to a set of ideas that developed in theoretical physics about 20, 30 years ago, called the physics of spin glasses. And the way he described it is this: there'd be some physicists sitting around taking some measurements on a silicon chip. And they go away, have a cup of tea, come back and record the measurement, go back, have another cup of tea, come back, and now the answer was different. And physicists were not used to the fact that experiments could not be reproduced. Now, it turned out that the mathematics underlying this non-reproducibility in silicon chips turned out to be relatively simple and has, I think, some really interesting implications for economics. And I've since started working with Jean-Philippe on translating those ideas into thinking about how and why individuals disagree in making predictions about markets.